My guest today is Jeff Park, president of Waltz Health.
Approach with humility. Recognize that I need to earn my position there, despite the fact that I was sitting there. I still needed to show that I earned my right.
What value are you adding as a 20-something-year-old on a board?
I used hard work. Instead of just opining on a concept, I'd read all the material, understood who the competitors were. When you're doing diligence and trying to invest in a company, you've got a lot of leverage. The day after the check's written, you actually have none. You said, this is either going to work wonderfully or it's going to be my last job as a CFO and in this industry.
As you look back over the last 20 years, what are you most proud of?
People have decided to follow me into new opportunities. Yeah. People are a competitive advantage. That's the only thing. It's not an idea. It's the people. Change moves at the rate of trust.
My guest today is Jeff Park, president of Waltz Health, now a part of Eversana. Over a decade, Jeff helped transform SXC Health Solutions into Catamaran, which ultimately sold to UnitedHealthcare for $12.8 billion. That 65 times return is one of the most remarkable value creation stories in the pharmacy benefits manager or PBM industry. But this conversation is really about how Jeff thinks about M&A, about integration, about people. Jeff started his career as a venture investor in his mid-20s, sitting on up to 10 boards. He learned that a title doesn't give you the right to speak, but preparation and humility do. That early lesson has followed him through every chapter since. A year after the United sale, Jeff did something surprising. He stopped, moved his family to Portugal, and spent a year and a half figuring out who he was when he wasn't working. He came back with a clearer sense of what he wanted: work that's meaningful, with people he trusts, in a space where he can make an impact. That's what brought him to Waltz Health, where he's using technology to improve price transparency for prescription drugs. Jeff is the sort of leader that people want to follow, and dozens have. My favorite quote from this conversation: change moves at the rate of trust. It's clear that Jeff has earned that trust. After our interview, Jeff walked me to the FIFA store so I could buy my USA jersey. No spotlight needed is proud to welcome Jeff Park. Well, Jeff, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Welcome to New York in the middle of FIFA World Cup. Has it been fun?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's always a little busy. It's better than when the UN's in session.
I suppose that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
I know you missed the Knicks, but you got the World Cup, so it's not terrible.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Me too.
There's, I think probably a lot of listeners haven't seen or heard from you in a while. Mm-hmm. So we're going to catch up on where you are and then also maybe take a look back.
Great.
You're at Waltz Health, with Waltz Health, which is part of Eversana. So tell us what Waltz is.
Sure. So Waltz Health is actually created as a new company that was created by the founder, Mark Thier, and his son, John Thier. And we put all the old band back together from my previous OptumRx Catamaran days, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
But Waltz is really built to create opportunities for health plans and PBMs to reduce the cost of prescription drugs. So thematically similar to my experience, but we use technology to really access marketplaces of prescription drugs. What's crazy about our healthcare industry, in particular in pharmacy, is that one drug produced by one manufacturer can have literally thousands of prices.
I know.
And even inside
so
the same pharmacy can be hundreds of prices for that drug. There was a Wall Street Journal article last year that talked about Part D, so where everybody's reporting drug prices and compliant, that one product had 2,200 different prices. And so when you think about that in the commercial environment, it's difficult for patients to get the best price, for sophisticated payers to even understand how it works. And so we used really this systemic thinking of how the industry operates, where the claim systems work, the GUI parts of machinery, of switches and pharmacy payment systems. And we optimized and used technology to make it more efficient. And so today we support about 14 million lives. We can help patients get more affordable medications without them having to do anything different, all behind the scenes. Last year, we saved about $300 million for our plans and our patients. So it's definitely using automation on top of the old rails to make it smarter.
Am I right in saying, is it kind of like a good RX, but behind the scenes?
So GoodRx is focusing on cash prices for patients who are off coverage and benefits. We're focusing on patients in their insured benefits, getting better prices for them.
Got it.
So, it's a medication that's on formulary. Their doctors prescribed it.
Yeah.
They stay inside their benefit, counts towards their deductible, whether it's a high-cost specialty medication or a low-price generic.
So you're bringing together technology as well as understanding the entire supply chain to kind of hopefully lower prices for consumers at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's been fun. We originally put our own money in, and as well as getting money from Google. So Google is a big part of helping create new technology in marketplaces. And we're now part of a large organization called Eversana, which is helping manufacturers bring products to market.
That's great.
Yeah.
So it does feel like you're maybe going back home a little bit because you started your career more on the technology side. You were introduced to your first company, SXC, through a private equity venture firm called Covington Capital. You were in your 20s. You were doing a lot of different private equity venture, mostly in the tech and healthcare space. Am I right about that?
Yes. Yeah.
And my understanding is you were sitting on a variety of different boards, up to 10 boards during that period of time, and you were introduced to SXC. What was it about SXC that was intriguing? And I hate to say, what value were you adding as a 20-something-year-old on a board?
Absolutely. I was very lucky. Working in a venture capital firm, the idea was, young enough to understand what technology was coming to markets back, really a long time ago in the late 90s, what technology was back then and is today.
That's amazing.
And then a financial background. So being able to do diligence and valuations and understand how to put together businesses. But I was learning a lot. What you think when you're 18 and 20 and 23 and 25 and what you really realize is different. But good circumstances and good luck put me in the position to be able to work with some very interesting CEOs around their journeys of how to create success and, really understanding what was an interesting company. And what was interesting about SXC was that it was using technology, was getting paid per transaction to process a claim. And one thing we know about U.S. healthcare systems is we like to consume medications, and as we age, we consume more of them. And so the business was a very good recurring business model. And the idea was really, how do you extend and expand past selling just technology to get more and more of market share? And so it was interesting. I knew the team, I knew the CEO at the time, and I thought it was a great opportunity to join the culture and fit, which I thought might have been a 2-year journey. And 10 years later, I was still there.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, but going back, sitting on those 10 boards, as a 25, 26-year-old kid, I can say that. How did you earn the right to speak up?
Great point.
To be able to express an opinion when, quite frankly, I'm sure
Correct.
There were people that were double your age, if not more.
Yeah. Well, the first is to approach with humility, right? So recognize that I need to earn my position there, despite the fact that I was sitting there. I still needed to show that I earned my right. And I used hard work. I understand that as itself is not its own goal and objective, but instead of just opining on a concept, I'd read all the material, understood who the competitors were, would go through the financials, would have a perspective on, aspects that perhaps a board member wouldn't really be reading on. And then because we were a large investor in the company, I had an outsized voice. And I recognized that when you're doing diligence and trying to invest in a company, you've got a lot of leverage. The day after the check's written, you actually have none, So you have to be able to use your relationships and earn the right to be a contributor, to continue to influence. So it was an opportunity with that many different boards and that many different interesting people on those boards to just be a student of, you've got people who've built companies and experts in various industries and, listen to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So SXC was actually the merger of two companies that I think you actually spearheaded that deal of, I think it was System Excellence and
Comcotech.
Comcotech, thank you, because I was not going to pronounce that one right.
Pretty good.
At some point, you decide that you want to join a CFO. Yeah. What made you decide to make the leap from being an investor to actually wanting to be an operator?
Probably a little naivete, but I definitely wanted to get my hands dirty. It's when you're advising or on the board, there's only so much you can really influence and control. And I really thought this was a great opportunity, the right opportunity in the market, the right culture, that I could make a difference. And like I said, I had a perspective that it would maybe be a short run, and really a great opportunity to take a company public in the U.S., which I had never done before.
Yeah.
And I had a view that I would be doing, a third of my time with investors, a third of my time on sort of closing the books and the accounting process, and then a third of my time on, M&A or operations. And I realized that each of those were double. So it was a lot of time, but I've never been afraid of work.
Yeah.
And so that was, it was a great opening opportunity for me.
So the IPO process, that was pretty shortly after you became CFO that you guys came public, right?
Yeah.
What was that like? What were some of the big learnings from that experience? And you did tell me this story about learning how to communicate with investors. If you can maybe share with our audience.
Yeah. There's so many lessons from the IPO. I think we learn everything the hard way, and you learn from the tough experiences the most. The IPO, probably the most important thing I got to understand was who is going to be involved with telling your story after the 2-week roadshow is more important than the person or the name of the bank that you get on the front label. Everybody. So we worked with JPMorgan, a great organization. So no side eye for them. We were a small company. We're not an important at the time important client to JPMorgan, nor the analysts, nor the type of investors that are going to JPMorgan for they were looking at the time for bigger companies. We're a $200-300 million market cap business, not the snack bracket.
Right.
And we should have spent more time with the analysts and the investment banks that actually carry that type of stock afterwards, fill the book up with those types of people. So that was really an important lesson for me around the thinking about who you want to be telling the story
who can
to.
Support you.
And then I learned I had done a lot of presentations and communications with investors and otherwise, but trying to distill a story into a 45-minute meeting and 2 follow-up calls and support an investment thesis requires really a lot of work up front and a lot of preparation. And so, and then once the story was in the market, I remember going out with an analyst. It's maybe the one you're thinking of, Cory Tobin to William Blair. Great person.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of people in my career that took me under their wing at different times. And it was an early meeting, and one of the investors was asking me some very difficult questions that I probably wasn't even hadn't thought of, and either trying to answer and stumbling and fumbling, He took me aside afterwards and said, first of all, if they're asking you questions that you don't know the answer to, it's okay to say, I'll get back to you. And, I know it seems obvious, and I'll come back to that in a second. And the second was redirect them to what is important. If they're asking about this, say, that's interesting, but really what you should be thinking about is this. Mm-hmm. And then never forget that they can't do your job. So that was just to probably gin me up a little bit.
Yeah.
But after that, I started to track all of the public information that were in our financials that an analyst could even, or an investor would even look at, so that I could have a good recall of what it was and what it is. And every investor earnings call for 10 years, I carried a small Post-it note with me. And one of them was what Cory told me, which is, I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
It's okay to say I don't know, and I'll get back to you. And the others were about slowing down and smiling, even when I was on, a video or of call. Everybody can kind of hear it in your voice, whether you're relaxed or not.
Yeah.
So these small things like that I learned.
I think that's great. But it does remind you the power of storytelling.
Yeah.
And being able to tell your story convincingly and just repeating it again and again.
Yes.
Well, that's good to know. I'll have to remember the slowing down and smiling part of it as well. You guys went public in 2006. And And at that point, SXC is a technology provider. As you mentioned, it does the claims processing behind the pharmacy benefits managers.
Right.
At what point do you and Mark say, no, we actually want to be a PBM. We want to be one of our customers, really.
Right.
And then you embark on a lot of M&A. So talk about that strategy and why it was the right one, because that is it's literally strategically changing the direction of the company.
Yeah, so it started with really some very basic ideas. How do we grow the business? So what are we trying to accomplish, and how do we extend and expand? When you're touching, at the time, millions and millions of transactions, and you're getting paid 25, 35 cents, it's like we actually want to make more than. How do we make 55, 65, $1.50? Like, how do we? We have customers that are ideal, the largest plans in the market, large health plans, large PBMs, so like an envious client list, and yet we need to make more money from them. So we either have to develop new products to sell them,
right,
increase our prices with them, and we had went out to we visit all our clients and sort and support, and one of them, David Blair at Catalyst.
Mm-hmm.
They had a Formula One car in their foyer of their beautiful offices.
Really?
Yes. And after that meeting, I'm like, we have got to have a different idea. We seem like we're doing all the hard work and the goo machine here. And
they've got a Formula One car in their lobby.
And we ended up buying him later. But nonetheless, that was a very important piece for us. I knew how to do acquisitions, and from my time in venture capital. We sat at a table, I can still see it in my mind. And when we were making our first acquisition of what was then a relatively broken public PBM called NMHC, they just sort of had a tough story and hadn't been well received, and it was sort of putting all the chips in. We said, this is either going to work wonderfully or it's going to be my last job as a CFO and in this industry.
So you mentioned NMHC, National Medical Health Card. In 2008, for $143 million, you acquired them. I got to imagine, and so that really gave you the scale to become a PBM. But now you're competing with your customers.
Clients, yeah.
Right, yeah, with your clients. There's no going back.
Mm-hmm.
So what conversations did you have with them to say, okay, well, we're still going to provide this technology for you, but now we're competing with you. I mean, that's tough. You can't sell much new business, I think, after that.
You're right. The good things that were happening, though, we had the best technology at the time. We were sort of the de facto standard. And it's hard to uninstall a system.
Sticky.
And very sticky. We had what was user groups, so which was developing the next advancements. And so literally half of the industry was part of our development efforts. And so it was really going to be hard for people to unplug it. So we helped them understand that, we may compete in the marketplace, just like the dozens of other competitors, but we wouldn't be using their data or looking at their prices or anything like that. We'd beat them heads up. And we didn't try to target our clients to win. We went into the open market with our ideas. And the difference that we had that our competitors didn't was that we had what we called the pathway to control. So you could buy technology from us if you wanted. You could add networks if you wanted, clinical services, mail services, all the way up to full service. Or you could, go up and down that stack. And that's not something anybody could provide. They could provide a full stack of services. They couldn't provide technology alone, and they couldn't break it into pieces. And that ultimately was a kill shot for us in selling in the open market. Even if clients never wanted to go up and down the stack, the idea that they could was the compelling reason for large plans and buyers. Yeah.
So having the flexibility for future customers and clients to allow them to pick and choose whatever off the menu that they really wanted.
Right.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
So NMHC was the first of 14 plus deals, if I'm right about that.
Yeah.
So you talked about being really good at deals, and I don't want to say an aggressive but well sequenced series of deals that happened over the next, let's talk about decade. Was there a secret sauce on how you think about M&A? What are some of the critical metrics or factors or characteristics of a target deal that have made certain ones more successful?
Yeah. Well, first at the highest level, it was always three things. So, does it fit into our strategy? And, that narrows the field. Is there synergies that you can extract? And, did it fit your culture and was it going to add growth into your business? And the culture and growth was also tied to people. We needed to know that if we acquired a company and all of their people left, we wouldn't be left wondering, now what do we do with this? The investors in the beginning were concerned about not only us making acquisitions and integration by itself is a risky endeavor for any company, but back to your opening point about growing more in a market where we're competing with our customers. So when we initially did the NMHC deal, our stock traded off like a third. It was a huge headwind for us. People didn't think it made sense that we could do it. Yeah. And then, we effectively tripled the EBITDA from NMHC. And then all the investors this was a great idea. Yeah, when are you going to do the next one? And so I think an important part, though, was for us making sure that business was ready to integrate. If you're still absorbing an acquisition and you're trying to put more fuel on top, it can just not only gas the team, but it breaks up. It's difficult. The gooey part of integration is what makes it successful. The culture integration of people and buy-in from the new team, and not breaking apart what you're trying to buy. And so we got to be very good at it. We sort of had a playbook. We started, for example, with the strategy of what decisions needed to be made, when they need to be made by, and march towards the beat of making these actionable, accountable decisions. And we had sort of Friday morning executive stand-ups for the integration. And we ended up having those Friday morning meetings for almost 10 years because of the integration work that we were underway. Yeah. But, nothing like muscle memory for a team that gets to see how it works, that it's successful, and it sort of, success begets success.
You really talk about integration. So to say that SXC, which ultimately became Catamaran, and you would not call that a roll-up. Would you call it a roll-up?
I think it was a roll-up in some ways. We were rolling up the market, our customers. So we were buying up our businesses that had already used our platforms and technology. But the integration work was outside of the core claim system, was all of the processes and people. And making sure we were, operating, trying to get to the one answer, one process, one platform, one set of leadership, one set of accountability. It's easy in acquisitions to sort of leave it alone, and that's too hard, and we'll get that later, and that's death.
That was not
that's death.
Yeah, that was not your strategy.
No. Yeah,
that's good. No, I think having one cohesive operating system.
Yeah.
And, but also I love the accountability, that every Friday kind of accountability. Was there a time or a certain signal that said, okay, the organization is ready for their next one, ready for the next deal?
Yeah. So, the investors were always pressuring for,
more
and more.
Yeah,
that's unrelated. But, when there's a drumbeat for okay, what's next? We're always hunting, clients and building the relationship, which takes a long time to get someone over the line. So that part of it, but it was organizationally, we needed to make sure we could absorb the work. Because it's the same technology team, it's the same clinical operations leadership, it's the same PBM implementation processes, the same people that are turning on new clients. So it is making sure that there's capacity on the line. Investor demand for it was insatiable, as much as there was no limit to what they wanted us to raise cash or go and do. And we are fortunate in our 10 years to almost always meet and beat, but not every quarter was glorious. And so we knew with acquisitions, we could generate, usually two or three times the amount of synergies on a business through purchase synergies. And so we were anxious to make sure we could line up the right ones at the right price and execute. Yeah.
Well, what's incredible to me when I look at some of these numbers, so as I mentioned, in 2008, you did NMHC for $143 million. 4 years later, you did the Catalyst deal, which ultimately became Catamaran. That was for $4.4 billion.
Yeah.
Just an incredible. And then you became the fourth largest PBM.
Mm-hmm.
So Catalyst was also a publicly traded company. But I also heard that the culture, and maybe this goes to the Formula One car, but I did hear that the culture was a little different than SXC. Can you talk about, one, did you know it was going to be different when you acquired it? And two, how was it different? And then how did you maybe change it to the SXC model?
Well, one of the things that we really worked on in our business was accountability. I know everybody says you need to be accountable. You need to be action oriented. You need to be financially literate. We're making decisions not just for our investors, but to save money for our clients. So that's really an important set of lenses for us to work through. And Catalyst had grown through acquisitions without necessarily putting all the pieces together. And that already just creates kind of factions and fractions in the business. And it was the first company that I acquired that really I could see teams. So I'm originally from Chicago, and I lived in Chicago for a long time, not originally. And everybody seemed to know in the meetings who was a Sox fan and who was a Cubs fan. Like I they weren't wearing anything. They were just like sort of the thing. And inside Catalyst, you could tell who was on, this leader's team and that leader's team. And they were interesting fractions and factions of sort of made decisions that were based on which team they were on, not necessarily the good of the business. And so for us, it was important to get the culture right. And that was one of the reasons why we changed the company's name entirely. SXC is a tongue twister to say, Systems Excellence.
Doesn't roll off the tongue. You're right.
Catalyst is a pretty cool name. But we wanted it to be a new company. And so when we built the leadership structure, right after, the integration, there's usually, after announcement, there's usually only 90 days to clear HSR and get ready to launch. And so we use that time, whether it was 90 days or 4 or 5 months, to prep and plan day one actions. And day one actions were organizational leadership changes. Sure. Top 5, what we're focusing on, the integration plan and what's important. And so we worked on seeding the leadership team of our business and saying, we want leaders from both sides of the company to be integrated into the business. And if you don't want to be on a combined organization and team, we need to know that early and make decisions. And so it was probably one of the more interesting, powerful lessons that I thankfully learned around impact to culture. It's normal for people to say culture kills deals. This was the first time I could see how it could have. But it worked well. Respect and trust helps get over warring factions at times.
No, that's it's interesting to hear about having to, or not having to, but choosing leaders from both. Some would say, well, shouldn't you just choose the best athlete or the best player? But was it important that this was a combined company? Because you were roughly about the same size when you came together. Yeah,
and we were roughly the same size. We took leaders in sales, account management, made them the leaders of the combined organization. Our technology sort of team was the leaders in the technology areas, as you might expect. They had great people in operations. And so we really focused on sort of getting the best of the best, 2 in the box. Making sure we had a balanced leadership at the top of the organization that had good representation of all areas, and that is what really buys in the rest of the team.
Because people are loyal to the leaders that they know.
Absolutely.
The people. That makes sense.
Yeah.
A few more years later, you sell the business to UnitedHealth for $12.8 billion. I mean, truly an incredible run when we talk about SXC.
Well, I started, it was $200 million.
200 million
that was crazy.
to $12.8 billion. So an incredible value creation over less than a decade. But you were only at United for a year.
Yeah.
I guess we just got, finished talking about culture, but talk to me about why. I mean, I think you were one of the first ones to leave from the band that had been put together, if you will.
I loved United, honestly. Financial discipline, which was matched and married to the way we made decisions. I think strategic planning, the capabilities of looking at not only sales pipeline, but acquisition pipeline, goals and objectives. I think, making strong, it was just a very well-organized business, I think culturally as well. My job was to integrate these businesses. We had about an $800 million EBITDA business. Theirs was a $900 million EBITDA business. And we produced another $900 million in EBITDA on the integration. So I felt like I did my job.
Yeah.
And
in a year.
I was in, at the time I was 45, so still young, obviously. And my kids were 10 and 13. I'd spent 10 plus years basically on the road, and I'd achieved some success financially, and looked at my wife and sort of decided if we're going to do something different, now's the time. And so we moved to Portugal. I was, United wanted me to stay. I was interested in taking a break and really sort of cleaning my ideas and mind and deciding really what I wanted to do next. But no, United was a great organization. There's so many important pieces that I learned at United in my time there. And one of the things that we brought into in my career over time, we always produced what was like a top 5. Focus on the 5 things that we need to make sure we do as an organization, and who's accountable, how are we measuring it, and when is it going to be due by, and publish it with names and dates. And Hemsley and the United team really loved the idea. And so we had everybody on our business sign it, and they wanted to sign it too. So
that's great.
So I think there was no culture change or anything like that for me. It was more just personal.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, I'll say this about United. I'm surprised because obviously it's a behemoth of a company, and I got to imagine, having been an entrepreneur for so long, to get absorbed into something like that, it might be stifling, but it doesn't sound like it was for you.
No, it wasn't. We had a great, like I said, a great team. It's a great organization. So
that's great.
We had worked with United. I mean, they were a client of ours. So back to the beginning, we were trying to buy clients and put them into our business. They were one of the targets we were trying to spin out Optum RX into our business and unlock value for United. You may remember back in the day, there was a lot of discussion about why won't you, sell this and make more money off of it and unlock it from the stock. And so we've been working on that. Yeah.
So maybe let's dig a little personally on this Portugal move.
Okay.
You're Canadian, which is why you're so nice. Your wife is from Portugal, is that correct?
She's actually Canadian, but she was born to Portuguese parents. And so she's got her Portuguese citizenship.
Oh,
she was
fantastic.
born in France, actually. But
so you moved to Portugal. Your boys go into school there?
Yeah.
American school, maybe?
In English language, American curriculum school.
Were you thinking, I'm just not going to work, I'm going to slow down? What was that process like? Because I got to imagine when you're go, go, go all the time, and maybe you feel like that's your purpose, that's who you are as a worker, as an entrepreneur, a CFO, whatever. What was that purpose? What was that process like? And what did you learn about yourself in that year and a half?
I think first when we all travel, and usually I'm sure your travel was the same as mine. So let's say it's a week somewhere with only 6 or 8, calls.
Yeah, right.
So you're never really fully there.
That's right.
The idea of like 2 weeks off, that was a fantasy as well. And just, so this burning desire to say, I just actually want to do something where I'm absorbed into this beautiful place that we've decided to visit, whether it's for 2 weeks or a month. It seems like a fantasy to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But so that was the root of change. The second piece was I knew that if I was going to step back from work for a period of time, and I woke up the next day in the same spot and opened the Wall Street Journal, I'd be thinking, now what am I doing?
Right.
So
Yeah.
I wanted something different. So it was an important sort of transition to create. My kids who we had moved when they were very young to the U.S. Were game to move around, but wanted to be established in a place while we traveled. So I wanted to see more of Italy and France and England and Spain, and so we traveled all over while the kids were in school, and it was a lot of fun. And I really spent some time focusing on, what do I want to do? What's important to me? How do I define myself? What do I tell people about? What am I doing when I'm not working?
Yeah.
My kid said, you're unemployed. I said, well, that's true, but it doesn't really fit right. So how do I describe myself?
Yeah.
And what's important? And so it really was an important year for me for reflection, time with family, and really recharge my batteries as to what I wanted to do.
Yeah, that's great. Is there one maybe change or something that you've brought with you from that year and a half as you went on to your next venture?
Well, an appreciation for work, which may sound weird, but I do recognize that I have the fortune of being able to do what I choose to do, with whom I choose to do it, and for what reason. That it's not anything to do with financials anymore in my life.
That's great.
Which is a blessing,
right.
a value. Yeah. So, and so it really gives you a perspective to think, I want to do something meaningful to me. I want to do it and make an impact that I can help control, do something I know, and do it with people that I trust, love, and can have some fun with.
Yeah.
And so I've carried that with me. The punchline, I think, there was three things that were important when I was reflecting on what my next chapters would look like. I knew I wanted to continue to find ways to give back. I wanted to focus on continuing to make myself better, whether it's mentally, financially, emotionally.
Sure.
And I wanted to be intellectually stimulated, which doesn't necessarily, it can mean different things to different people.
Yeah.
So those were the three thematics for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you did decide to move back, and there was an opportunity called Welldyne RX. And this was for you to be chairman, CEO. This is your show to run.
Mm-hmm.
What was it about this deal? It's a Carlyle-backed company, but you were only there for, I think, 3 years.
Yeah.
So talk about that experience.
It was an opportunity to work with a large PE firm. Obviously, Carlyle's got a great reputation in the market. The industry at the time, they had a PBM asset who they still have, is a client of mine now. And we're looking to buy another PBM, integrate it in, and ultimately sell
So maybe a rinse and repeat.
And
SXC.
So I was like, wow, this is the one thing that I know what to do with. It's in an industry I know how to recruit people into it. And I think I have a good answer on how to change the business model. And so it really kind of came to if not this, then what am I going to say yes to get back into do? And so that was the reasons for me. COVID hit. It was the markets have been challenging. Obviously, from a PBM perspective, it's been nothing but change for the last 10 years around regulations and legislation. And but it's been great. I recruited 40 of my former employees over there. Really got to see the fun of building and creating something new. Ultimately, it's about creating liquidity and finding something that we can move to do next. We just did a lot of transaction reviews and couldn't find one that would fit for them. And, we had interested acquirers and couldn't find one that would be a good answer for them. So ultimately it's about deciding, listen, we're here to build. We either buy and sell it or we need to move on.
Yeah. You actually said to me, if you're not buying, you're dying.
Yeah, in that business, yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So was it hard to leave? Because as you said, you recruited 40 people.
Yeah. Yes, it was. It was hard in some regards, but like I said, I make decisions about what I want to do and who I want to do it with. And I wasn't there just to have a cool title. I really wanted to get something done, and they just weren't in a position to do that yet.
Yeah.
But what we did do is we created a change in their business model. So launching a new market, now that's what they call Welldyne. It was really around taking the assets of the PBM and almost going backwards to that SXC story. Instead of saying a full scale, it's like, what can we break into its component parts and how do we sell it? So selling our first large health plan business, selling multiple manufacturers, new dispensing solutions, and really kind of creating momentum for the assets that they had and transitioning a business that was focused really on rebate and rebate retention into a new transparent model. But the PBM industry is a pretty tough one to find buyers and sellers for. The market multiples are way down. You talked a little bit about Catalyst earlier. At the time, we paid 22 times EBITDA for that business, the highest multiple ever paid, and they traded up. And investors invested more, and it was accretive.
Yeah.
Now multiples are now 6, 7, 8x. It's a different business.
So you did talk about the criticisms of the PBM industry that's happened. I think in 2022, the FTC opened up an investigation. They had a scathing report in 2024. Do you think that's justified? That the PBM industry became so big, so concentrated, so vertically integrated that it just reduced competition?
Yeah, I don't think it's reduced competition. I understand, there's 3 large players, but the industry competes every day. So there's thousands and thousands of RFPs that go out annually for these businesses. And so you're always in the market getting prices and competing with small players, big players for different models. I think really what the problem is scale creates large players who have a hard time, offering more and more clarity and transparency. And as the industry's really shifted more of the cost of healthcare to individuals, it's really highlighted some of the ways the money flows that are broken in our business. There's a 2025 drug spend is like $600 billion. $100 billion is paid for by patients. I read last year we had 100 million new prescriptions left abandoned at a pharmacy that were never filled. Yeah, exactly, because of cost. And so patients are sort of getting stuck with this bill and asking questions like, why is this, how come it's a $1,200 drug when it's really a $600 net drug? And how come I can't get access to these medications? And so it's created a drumbeat inside of Washington around affordability and rural pharmacies that are, getting forced out of support. And that has kind of begot a series of reporting requirements and transparency requirements that I think are not always the most helpful. But I've had a front seat with regulators. I'm on the industry lobby board, so I spend time in Washington with Congress, and they've got a tough job. They listen to every different industry complain about everything they do, and it's challenging. But what happens with challenge is it creates the need for change, and that's really what we need in healthcare anyway. And so this probably isn't the way the PBMs were hoping for, but it is a positive opportunity to really focus on what's important: affordability for patients, access to care, measuring outcomes, and getting people healthy. Yeah,
transparency for sure. So you decide to join Mark Thier. So we have not yet talked about him. I mean, I was told you are the perfect corporate couple. So you and Mark have been together since the early days of SXC. Why has that relationship worked for so long? Him as the CEO, you as the CFO, as president, COO. What is about that relationship that's made it so work?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's trust. We've built a good bond over time through struggle and opportunity, success, near-death experiences in the business model sometimes. And so that really anchors you on the right, people. I don't know about the perfect corporate couple, but I can finish. I know what he's thinking. He probably knows what I'm thinking. And, we sort of divide up the parts of the world to conquer, I guess. But, he's very creative. He's taught me a lot, preparation and planning, his presentation capabilities, his ability to sort of see strategy. Those are pieces that I've learned and try to emulate. And, I take a view of execution, operations, accountability, deliver results. It's a good combination.
Yeah. Complementary skill sets. Yeah. That's great. So he and his son developed, or founded Waltz.
Yeah.
They asked you to join. You didn't join right away, but as Welldyne maybe wasn't playing out, was it just a no-brainer to join them?
I really thought what we could do was important. I think with the beginnings of selling large health plans, cost savings ideas, would leverage the relationships I had, using really technology to drive change, which is something I've always been comfortable with.
Yeah.
It just fit right. And back to the thematic of it was people I wanted to do it with. It's been fun here. We've had another wild ride, and working with people that you love, doing something that you know how to do, creating disruption in a space. It's really a lot about people.
Well, it seems like you're coming back home a little bit with the technology aspect of it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
You did talk about the people. So I did want to ask, there are times where you want to bring the band back together, but then there are times where you want new blood.
Right.
What's that balance, or what's the right situation where you want new blood to look at something brand new versus, as you said, bringing the band back together?
I think part of there's working and recruiting people that you've worked with in the past only works when you're bringing people to be successful in a role where they can get it done and they're accountable to deliver results. People that you've seen successful in that specific scenario.
Yeah.
That's the piece. But in particular in healthcare, knowledge of how the flow of funds and how it works is critical. But new ideas are how we change, how we make change and disruption. I think in particular, at least in my experience in healthcare, having just a whole new set of ideas, I think it should all operate like this, doesn't succeed. And having the old ideas, well, this is how we've always done it, that also doesn't succeed.
Right, yeah.
So you really have to find the right blend, create an environment where you're taking the best of people who understand the industry and how it works with new imagination and new technologies, and blend them together. My job really isn't to be the smartest person. It's to ensure that I've got a group of individuals who understand the direction and can unlock the best that they can bring. Have an environment where people feel like they're challenged and grow and held accountable for the results. But people really want to win. They want to work hard for people they love and trust, and they want to be successful at their job.
Will M&A be part of the Waltz Health strategy?
We have looked and continue to look at opportunities now as part of a large organization, Eversana. So Waltz was acquired by Eversana, and Eversana is a company that's focused on helping manufacturers bring products to market. So everything from how to price a product to dispense, distribute, wholesale, advertise and market. And the environment really is changing pretty dramatically. So connecting this Waltz technology, which is payers, large-scale payers looking for direct access to best prices and new models in the marketplace. It's been an interesting marriage. So we're always in the market looking at new opportunities, but we have everything that we need to be successful in the business. We're looking at ways that we can continue to drive growth and scale.
Are you an operator at heart, or are you a deal guy at heart?
Yeah, I'd say as I started my career, I was more of a deal person. And I'm an operator. So, I like solving problems. I like to get into the how it's getting done and how we're resolving it. What are we going to be doing? That's where you can really create something new. Writing checks, anybody can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is your long-term mission as you think about Waltz and Eversana?
I think what's interesting is that the industry is at a bit of an inflection point. The case for change is already made. The sort of fight against inertia with regulation and changes, that's tipped as well. Yeah. So large clients are used to say, you can't get fired from buying IBM. Now it's like, how come we're buying from the same provider for 10 years? We must be doing it wrong. Whether that's a true conclusion or not, they're apt to say we have to do something different. And with the regulatory changes, it's causing people to make choices. And, as a disruptor and as a change agent, that's what you want. Those are the conditions. Yeah. You want chaos. You want people deciding new things. That's how you win in the marketplace. So I think we're at a very interesting spot where these large drug manufacturers and payers and patients are demanding to see where's the money and how do I understand it. And we're in a position with the tools, technologies, and relationships to put these new models in place. So that's the exciting part.
That's great.
Yeah,
I do love the fact that the industry is actually demanding change.
Yeah,
which I think is. That doesn't always happen, but I think you're right. It's a shift that almost every industry has to look at.
Yeah.
As you look back over the last 20 years, what are you most proud of?
Well, that's good. It was never really a promotion or a particular piece. It's people. I see the world through the teams, and what probably stood out to me is some of the proudest pieces is when people have decided to follow me into new opportunities, and it's humbling to recognize that you've created enough that not only people will want to talk to you, but they'll actually want to work with you and put their career in your hands for some time. So that's probably the thing. And it sounds like interesting, but the ability to say, I've got people who I can recruit in from, call center operations to technology teams to account management to sales. And, it's not just, I've got 3 people that I've always worked with.
Yeah.
It's humbling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you had 1 or 2 pieces of advice for people who are starting up new businesses, particularly in the healthcare services industry, which is fraught with, politics and the old ways of doing things. Yeah. What might that be?
People are a competitive advantage. That's the only thing. It's not an idea. It's the people. People change moves at the rate of trust, and so you have to have people who can have confidence in who they're selecting and why they're selecting.
Yeah.
So that's probably the most important piece. Entrepreneurs know it, that their team is how they spend time selecting. It's candidly, it's more important than the idea, because the idea is going to change in the market. The clients will show them something different. So you have to be able to adapt, and that's where people are the most important asset.
Yeah. I love that. Change moves at the rate of trust. Mm-hmm. I've never heard that expression, but I love that. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for your time. This has been really, really fun. Yeah. I can't wait to see what the next chapter holds for you and Mark, and what you continue to build and the disruption that you have. Because I will say, looking back at SXC, to create that much value from, as we talked about, $200 million to $12.8 billion, a 65 times return, is really incredible. So I think between the two of you and the leadership that you show, you can create a lot of value and impact a lot of lives.
Great. Well, it was a pleasure. Great to see you again.
Yeah. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.